Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. Prayer does not change God, but it changes him who prays. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought which they seldom use. Don't forget to love yourself. What is a poet? An unhappy person who conceals profound anguish in his heart, but whose lips are so formed that as sighs and cries pass over them they sound like beautiful music. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but, if one will, are to be lived. Love is all, it gives all, and it takes all. God creates out of nothing. Wonderful, you say, yes, to be sure. But he does what is still more wonderful. He makes saints out of sinners. Old age realizes the dreams of youth. Look at Dean Swift. In his youth he built an asylum for the insane. In his old age he was himself an inmate. Take away paradox from the thinker and you have a professor. Most men pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that they hurry past it. There is nothing with which every man is so afraid as getting to know how enormously much he is capable of doing and becoming. Faith is the highest passion in a human being. Many in every generation may not come that far, but none comes further. Trouble is the common denominator of living. It is the great equalizer. The truth is a snare. You cannot have it without being caught. You cannot have the truth in such a way that you catch it, but only in such a way that it catches you. Listen to the cry of a woman in labor at the hour of giving birth. Look at the dying man's struggle at his last extremity, and then tell me whether something that begins and ends thus could be intended for enjoyment. The paradox is really the pathos of intellectual life, and just as only great souls are exposed to passions, it is only the great thinker who is exposed to what I call paradoxes, which are nothing else than grandiose thoughts in embryo. Marriage brings one into fatal connection with custom and tradition, and traditions and customs are like the wind and weather, altogether incalculable. I begin with the principle that all men are bores. Surely no one will prove himself so great a bore as to contradict me in this. At the bottom of enmity between strangers lies indifference. People commonly travel the world over to see rivers and mountains, new stars, garish birds, freak fish, grotesque breeds of human. They fall into an animal stupor that gapes at existence, and they think they have seen something. Since my earliest childhood, a barb of sorrow has lodged in my heart. As long as it stays, I am ironic. If it is pulled out, I shall die. Concepts, like individuals, have their histories and are just as incapable of withstanding the ravages of time as are individuals, but in and through all this they retain a kind of homesickness for the scenes of their childhood. There are, as is known, insects that die in the moment of fertilization. So it is with all joy, life's highest, most splendid moment of enjoyment 'tis accompanied by death. Not just in commerce, but in the world of ideas, to our age is putting on a veritable clearance sale. Everything can be had so dirt cheap that one begins to wonder whether in the end anyone will want to make a bid. Because of its tremendous solemnity, death is the light in which great passions, both good and bad, become transparent, no longer limited by outward appearances. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Once you label me, you negate me. I see it all perfectly. There are two possible situations. One can either do this or that. My honest opinion and my friendly advice is this: do it or do not do it. You will regret both. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. The tyrant dies and his rule is over. The martyr dies and his rule begins. Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are. Patience is necessary, and one cannot reap immediately where one has sown. People understand me so poorly that they don't even understand my complaint about them not understanding me. A man who is a physical being is always turned toward the outside, thinking that his happiness lies outside him, finally turns inward and discovers that the source is within him. Boredom is the root of all evil, the despairing refusal to be oneself. If I am capable of grasping God objectively, I do not believe. But precisely because I cannot do this, I must believe. The more a man can forget, the greater the number of metamorphoses which his life can undergo. The more he can remember, the more divine his life becomes. I feel as if I were a piece in a game of chess. When my opponent says of it, that piece cannot be moved. Just as in earthly life lovers long for the moment when they are able to breathe forth their love for each other, to let their souls blend in a soft whisper, so the mystic longs for the moment when in prayer he can, as it were, creep into God. How absurd men are! They never use the liberties they have. They demand those they do not have. They have freedom of thought. They demand freedom of speech. Since boredom advances, and boredom is the root of all evil, no wonder, then, that the world goes backwards, that evil spreads. This can be traced back to the very beginning of the world. The gods were bored, therefore they created human beings.